Welcome to Playful Beginnings, a podcast about the magic of play therapy for therapists, students, and anyone interested. In our podcast, we'll explore the deeper understanding of play therapy and the skills we use when working with children.
We hope to help you understand the why behind what we do and how it helps kids heal and grow. I'm Dr. Christy Opiola, a working play therapist and university professor in North Carolina.
I'm Dr. Maggie Parker, a play therapist and professor in DC. Good morning, Christy.
Morning, Maggie. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I know, right? Welcome back, listeners.
Yes, it's going to take me a while to get used to 2026.
I know. I'm doing one of those. I'm not a New Year's resolution person. I should start with that, but I really need to get my life organized. And so I'm doing a spending cleanse and paying attention to what I spend money on. It's one of my goals for this year is just to have more clarity about my life. And so I'm doing a no spend January. So every day I have to write if I spend money, I track what I write it about. But it's forcing me to put 2026 on everything because you have to date it and mark what you spent money on, what category it went into. You don't have to give a rationale, but it's just to have more awareness. But so I'm really figuring out that I need to budget money better and that I'm forcing myself to put 2026 on everything.
Yeah, you're really in it.
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to be healthier.
Yeah.
I
think that's a good goal.
Yeah, I'm trying. My husband has done a really great job of, he set a goal to do a 10-mile run 2 years ago. And so he exercises all the time. And he's, wants us to exercise for our future, right? He's like, I want to be able to travel with you when we're retired. And so because of all my back stuff and everything, it's been pretty hit or miss. I get onto a streak of working out and then it starts hurting. And so now I'm like, which one is it, chicken or the egg? And do I just keep? So I'm trying to be easy and kind to myself. And even if I do 15 minutes of moving my body, that's 15 minutes that I wasn't doing before.
Yeah.
And so just trying to invest in my future. So yeah, I think we've also tried to make some organization towards the future of our podcast and PlayTherapySpace. And so we're going to we've got a plan. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about today is diagnosis, because a lot of people who have reached out to us have been asking, because I think sometimes I know we talk about CCBT in general, and there's a lot of research out there with specific diagnoses and what this looks like. And so we want to draw our understanding as well as the researchers who have done this work and how it applies and what that looks like. So I think, go ahead, Christy.
Yeah, I think it also helps with sometimes as a child-centered play therapist, either from other professionals or for parents reaching out for specific diagnoses, or they get the message that they should be doing more behavioral approached, cognitive approached ways of fixing, which would be true for adults who have a better capacity to use those skills. But for kids, the reason they may or may not work well, right? And then being able to speak to that clearly, we thought this might be a helpful conversation to have with you guys about how Maggie and I navigate that, where we get our ideas from. So talking philosophically, talking about, the practical side of some of this stuff. And then we also wanted to talk a little bit about how we work with parents around diagnoses within the play therapy space.
Yeah. And I think, I think it's important to talk about, because I think that sometimes diagnosing feels antithetical to what we do, because we care about the whole child and we believe in their capacity. And it's also part of the systems that we're in. And it's a reality of our profession. And there can be a lot of fear and assumptions and even some rigid expectations. I think that's what you're talking about, with behavioral interventions. This is what you should do with this diagnosis, or does CCPT work with this diagnosis? And I think you and I both wholeheartedly agree that CCBT is effective and helpful for children, regardless of diagnosis. And it helps to frame it as you're talking about diagnosing how it impacts that diagnosis and how the skills work specifically in those ways with those children. And I think
Mhm.
having that language is really important because you're going to be having conversations with parents. I would love it if we were having conversations with pediatricians and psychiatrists and diagnosticians and whomever and teachers, because I really do think that integrative approach is helpful. And we have to, as CCBT practitioners, really be able, I think sometimes in more ways than other professions, say how it is helpful and be concrete
Mhm.
and specific in those ways. And so we're hoping to help give some of that language for y'all.
Yeah. Well, and I think you're right. We don't work in vacuums anymore. We do work more interdisciplinary. We're doing more consultation. We're doing more dialoguing interdisciplinary. So it's important that that the nice thing about diagnosis is it's a shared language,
Yeah.
right? So everyone, the DSM-5 TR has helped, and the historic DSMs across centuries has helped us have a shared language to be able to talk about things. And right, we also work in managed healthcare systems that sometimes require us to use diagnosis, and so we can't bury our heads like ostriches in the sand and pretend it doesn't exist. We do we do use it out of requirement, but it doesn't mean that that is how we frame our work with children is not specific to diagnosis. So I do want to say that because we look more at the person than the pathology of what's happening for the child
Yeah.
from a CCPT lens, right?
Yeah.
The label's not what's important. It's more about, for me, right? Children are communicating with behavior. And when we look at the DSM and these diagnoses, really what they are just categories of symptoms that they've put a label on. And so we want to get past that. That's helpful when I'm talking with other professionals, but when I'm working with the child, when I'm working with the parent, what's more helpful is really looking at the behavior and having a better understanding of what the child is trying to communicate to me and how they're trying to express their needs, their wants. And that's really what I'm focusing on in session. And again, I only use the diagnosis part if it's required through health insurance or when I'm maybe talking with other professionals, their teacher, or to help them get supports and other stuff in other environments. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really just focusing on this. Diagnoses are a description of behaviors or a cluster of behaviors
mm-hmm.
that seem to align with in these ways. And
Yep.
there are nuances and complications and development. And when we talk about, I think people, or Christy, when we talk about theory with students, right? You have your guiding theory and your belief system, and you also have to take into account developmental theories, and you have to take into account anti-racism and anti-oppression and identity and attachment. So it is a piece of
The
the
larger.
puzzle that is part of a larger system, and it helps us in communication, and it helps us maybe understand what it is that these behaviors are trying to communicate to us. And so
Yeah.
that's for ultimately for CCBT therapists, we're really wanting to understand what the child is telling us. And so we focus on what they're doing in the room
Yeah.
and how they're communicating and responding to that, as opposed to, well, the DSM diagnosis says this, so I need to do that.
Yeah.
It's really trying to, that is one piece of the pie that can give you information and assist you as you respond, but that we're really responding to the child and their communications within the play space, I think is
Yeah.
important.
I think it's also sometimes when I look at the medical model versus the wellness model, right? The medical model is really looking at fixing. So it's
Mm-hmm.
looking at a disorder as a problem to be fixed. Where when I look at it from child centered, it's really about how do we help better understand this child. So it's looking rather at the child more holistically, looking for understanding, looking for greater awareness for the child, as well as their caregivers and parents around them, so that we could put supports in place to help this child. Not because there's nothing wrong with the child. They're
Right.
they're experiencing distress. They're experiencing something that's causing them to share with us that something doesn't feel right, and that's really so. When I think about it from a therapeutic standpoint and the therapist, when I get so honed in on the diagnoses, I tend to want to go into fix it mode. And when I think more holistically about the child, then what I'm really thinking more about is how can I better understand this child? How can I support them through the relationship? And so it also keeps me in the right frame of reference.
Yeah,
Um,
because we fundamentally believe that children have that innate capacity for growth and regulation,
yeah,
and they do that within that facilitative relationship. And so really maintaining that focus that this is not something that we need to fix. This is something that the child is struggling with and that has the innate capacity to grow within.
yeah, yeah. And like from a CCPT lens, the language we're using, or from a person-centered lens, right, is the actualizing tendency. We're talking about the OVP, the orgasmic processing valuing system within the child, right? Those are the things you're talking about there, Maggie, from language that we would use in CCPT for understanding what's happening for the
Yeah.
child.
Yeah. And I think, it really relates to many of the things that we've talked about. And so you might hear us repeating ourselves, but I think it's helpful, to look at it, even as we were talking about, executive functioning. There's so many things that kind of go into this. And so
Mm-hmm.
looking at development and really just, again, trying to take it as a nugget. This is helpful information. And then how am I going to show up?
Yeah.
And I think that's really helpful. And it gives you some insight as to what may happen within the room, maybe, right? If I have a child who's experienced trauma, there are a couple of things that I'm like, okay, these might show up. And if they don't, I don't need to create them. I don't, it's I still go with the flow, but sometimes it can provide a little information. Okay, this may be something that's showing up, or I don't know. Let's cut that because I don't think that's very helpful. I don't.
No, I do think it's helpful, right? Sometimes working with certain diagnoses when we see it in the playroom, it might be helpful for us to be, oh, okay, this is a common thing that we may see for this, right? It's a symptomology, so it's a behavior that multiple kiddos might experience or display in the playroom, but that's all it's really helpful to tell us. It doesn't give us much else than that,
Right. It's almost
because
like
we have to uniquely look at it per child. Why is this child sharing that with us? Is there something going on in their environment that may not be supporting them? And so they're displaying this to us. And because we tend to try to fix diagnoses instead of understand, right, the root of what's happening for the child, we do see common behaviors in the playroom based off of things because they have common experiences in other environments.
yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense. I was like kind of thinking because it's not, I think we have to be really careful because it doesn't mean that this is going to happen.
Well, because every kid's unique, right? Not
Yeah.
every kid's going to show up the same or have the same exact symptomology, which is why when we look at diagnoses in the DSM-5 TR, right, it's they need two of these five in this category. They need one of in this category. They need six of these 12 in this right? Because not everyone's going to show up. So they are almost like wide net, or that's how I understand it. It's kind of a wide net, but here are some symptomology that we may see. Not everyone shows up the same, and kids are going to show up, with a different array of the symptomology.
Yeah. Because every
And
child,
for me, again, it's not about the symptom, it's why is this kid expressing the symptom,
yeah. So what we're
right?
not going to do is structure our sessions around a symptom.
No.
We are not going to interpret their play through that diagnostic lens. We're going to
And I
try,
think,
go ahead.
no, 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 go ahead.
Since they were trying to understand, in my head, I may be like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? But I'm not going to be
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, that's because you're this. I'm
Right.
trying to say, understand what is going on for you in this moment. How can I help you understand yourself? How can I reflect in
Mm-hmm.
a way that I demonstrate that I understand you that can help facilitate that
Yeah,
growth?
I agree.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah.
I feel
I think it
like
also
Christy and
goes
I
to that
both have that.
idea. Well, I think it also goes to that idea of, as you were saying that, what was popping into my head, Maggie, was this idea of the internal versus external locus of control.
Mhm.
I think sometimes when we get into labeling or sharing, you have this diagnosis, right? It has a sticking quality to it for people, both for kids, their caregivers, and other things. And then we use that I'm talking about two things here. We use that label, right? So anytime something goes wrong with the child, we put the cause and the root of that back on the diagnosis, which then makes it feel like the child has no control over this, right? Which would be an external locus of evaluation and control for the child, where they just have a condition and therefore they can or they cannot control the behavior because of the condition. It's almost destined that, well, I'm going to struggle in these areas or I'm going to have problems with this, right? Which to me undermines their ability to like have for them to change. And I think it also takes away their ability to self-advocate for themselves, right? Because we're not really listening to what the behaviors are trying to tell us of where they're struggling. We just label them and therefore it's just that way.
Right.
And kids change over time. I think also what you were talking about earlier, we also sometimes label kids with diagnoses too early when really what we're seeing are more normal developmental behaviors, and that can be problematic because then they all of a sudden grow out of it because it may not have been the diagnosis at all, right? It's a normal developmental milestone, and unfortunately not everyone understands child development, which we hope they would, but it's shocking to me the more I learn how few professionals actually take development classes and have good understanding of development.
Yeah. Well, it could be something, and we've talked about this before. This little tidbit has really resonated with me, and I bring it up a lot. Of when kids go to school, that's usually around the time that they're starting to see teachers or maybe attention issues and difficulty with their moving their bodies. And so a quick kind of diagnosis is ADHD. And one, it's okay, so developmentally, are they capable of sitting for this long or having this attention for this long? But then also talking with that ENT doctor, and he's like, well, I see a lot of times when kids aren't getting sleep because they have sleep apnea. And and so it's so important, I think, that we draw from other professions because there are things that we may miss. And what I appreciate about CCPT is that because we're not treating a diagnosis and we're working with the child, the child is able to communicate with us and we are able to do our best to understand and help them feel understood. And so some of these things can then come out and it's, these are the things I'm recognizing. I'm wondering, could it be sleep? And, I've worked with parents before and I see what you're talking about. I hear you. I'm seeing these things in session. This
Yeah.
is what I'm doing. I also recognize this child is constantly blowing their nose and stuffed up. Have you thought about going to an ENT? Is there maybe a deviated septum? Is there something? I don't know. I am not a medical doctor. I am not about to go there. But there's things that come up there. Maybe this would be helpful just to get another idea.
Yeah.
Because we could be wrong in our diagnosing.
Yeah. It was also making me think as you were sharing that is we often put the cause on the child, yet the systems have shifted too, right? Like if I reflect back on what kindergarten looked like for me, it was optional, right? We were not required to go to kindergarten. And now it may still be optional in some states, but some states require it. But mine was play based. My kindergarten was purely play based. And now they're sitting and learning, right? And that may be helpful or that may be harmful, right? But it feels we're rushing development.
Mm-hmm.
We have shifted from looking at developmental milestones to other things. So this idea of we're ignoring the systemic and environmental factors that kids may be reacting to and really putting it totally inside the problem inside the child instead of are there other things you're talking about? Are there health things that may be impacting the child? They're not getting enough sleep, or maybe they have severe allergies, or they have some other issue going on that is then showing up, right? Because those factors are impacting how they're just getting their needs met day to day. And so I think it goes back to that idea that really behavior is the best way for kids to communicate with us because they don't have, or their ability is still growing and developing, and for them to be able to communicate through words and having the awareness of like how these things may be impacting them. I also think kids are pretty smart and they can tell us when we give them space to communicate it, but sometimes we don't listen to. So the cool thing about child-centered play therapy is it's really a space to listen to and to understand the child.
Yeah, no, I think this is great.
Yeah.
And if any of you guys have certain diagnoses that you're curious about or that you've been asked about with parents or caregivers, email us info@playtherapyspace.com or Christy at playtherapyspace.com, Maggie at playtherapyspace.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram.
And
And
and go to our website, playtherapyspace.com.
yeah, and we're on YouTube too.
Yes.
So
So exciting.
so many things. Yeah, but I think both of us are probably really tired right now, and that might be coming through. But I do hope that this was helpful because I think it's something that continues to come up. And so we want to be responsive to y'all's questions. And so, yeah, let us know. So, thank you, Christy.
Thanks and have a great start to your 2026.
Happy 2026.
I know. Woohoo! Happy New Year's. Yeah. Yeah. And we hope you continue to join us in the year 2026 as we explore different topics. So,
Bye, Christy.
bye.